Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting episode of Three Simple Men Making Their Way Through the Galaxy. Today, myself, Ryan, and Mike are still getting into the start of the Clone Wars with episode 16, season 1, called The Hidden Enemy.
I love this episode. I thought it was a really fun episode. I think we have a lot to talk about with it, which I like.
Oh, 100%. Let's get right off into the beginning of it. It's just pretty much we see our heroes, right? We see Anakin and Obi-Wan on the from last episode. We saw him in the space trying to penetrate and the blockade to get to the planet of Chrysosis, and now we see him on there.
We get the starting quote, which I might as well read. I think we'll just transition. I'll read these in the beginning because it is how the episode starts, and I think it's kind of a good way to kind of have the quote in the back of your head while we discuss it. So the starting quote of this episode is: "Truth enlightens the mind, but won't always bring happiness to your heart." And I think when we discuss this episode, you're going to clearly see how that theme of that quote really kind of resonates, especially when we get to the end. But yeah, with that, as you said, Tom, we're on Christophsis. We get again. I'm going to bring it up yet again this episode. I know I brought it up last episode. We get the fun opening that we're going to get every time of every episode, where it's the World War II kind of reference of the on the front, and it tells us like what happened last time. You know, the Jedi still fight in Christophsis. But I think it's important to bring it up again this time because we're going to get many more kind of war themes in this one, because it really is. Again, the whole series is Clone Wars, but I think as we go through, we're going to have some references that we might be able to pull out. Where do we want to start?
Well, first of all, I think we should start off with, I think that needs to be acknowledged right off the bat, the introduction of Commander Cody and Captain Rex.
Yes. I think we had, did we not have one of them?
We had Cody on the bridge with Obi-Wan at the beginning, but yeah, this is like the first time, to Brian and Tom's point, that we see the introduction of other clones. And obviously then, like we talked about last week, we see this theme of like individualization where we don't necessarily ID them by their CT serial numbers, they're going by common names. So we see Cody and Rex. So at this point, we're seeing the Jedi preparing to lay an ambush on the Separatists as they're marching down a street in between the two towers. So they're getting ready, everything's in position. Then one of the things that they first see is that the droids split off. And they're like, well, this isn't going according to plan. And then we see Obi-Wan's tower being attacked by the droids. And things are quite a mess because when we see them, they're some of them have their helmets off, they're taking some downtime, doing weapons check. It just becomes a complete mess. Obviously, the droids come in, they overrun the perimeter, or like get off the elevator, and there's plenty of them, and they're ready to hold off like the patrols on the outside. Then Anakin notices, and then like we talked about with Anakin, here comes the change of plan where he's like, well, we're going to the South Tower and we're going to help them out. So we see the callback to the ascension cables, but instead of going up, we're seeing them go across to the other tower. Then Anakin comes in, helps out Obi-Wan, and in the process calls in the gunship to evac them off the roof. And then when we get to the top, we see the appearance of another tactical droid who made its debut appearance in last week's episode. This time he's on the front lines with the droids fighting against the clones and the Jedi. So at that point, we see a clone pretty much snap the droid's head off and takes it as
that's my hero right there, by the way, because I think that was such a ballsy move to do. And just, this is not one of those further moments of like, I'm going to take a trophy. It's more of like, if I just do this right now, maybe we can get some insight. And
before we hop into the insight, I want to go back a little bit, Mike, to two points. One, as you said, we really are going to get a lot of the individualization of the clones. And I think we should kind of talk about the two ways they do that too, right? We get some clones that have different armor, and we see that immediately with what Rex has some blue highlights on his armor. Cody has yellow on his, and then the pilot
burnt orange,
we
I
get
think.
orange. We get a name of the pilot too. He's Hawk, and you can see he's kind of got like a hawk, like a bird on his helmet. I think it was a bird. I assume a hawk. But then something I noticed this time, and then I remembered I was gonna say it was the first time we've seen this, but then I thought about it, and it's not, because I'm pretty sure they were also used in the Phantom Menace during the pod racing. But we get the macro binoculars when they're looking down, and we get that very familiar, which we see kind of that same kind of viewfinder in the binoculars throughout Star Wars, which obviously was featured in the very first Star Wars: A New Hope. But I noticed that this time, and I was like, oh, hey, that's kind of a fun little throwback slash forward that they do.
Yeah, I will say one other thing too. So with to your point about Rex and Cody, Obi-Wan and Anakin had different clone battalions. So with Cody's design, that was the 212th Attack Battalion, and then Anakin had the 501st. So obviously that would explain the different color schemes with the troops, and then you just see all the regular troopers just in their plain white armor. But yeah, they, as Jedi generals, they did head up their own battalions of clones.
And
then
can I just say this first?
Yeah.
When you brought that up, Mike, between their own divisions, their own battalions, and stuff like that, it's what we're about to see for the first time is pretty much who's a master and an apprentice now have to be separated. Instead of teaching, Anakin about being a Jedi and stuff like that, now that the wars broke out, they're going to have to distance themselves a little bit, because Obi-Wan's going to be with Cody and the 212th, like you said, Mike, and then Anakin's got to be with the 501st. So there's no growth for Anakin to learn right now, because I think we've been talking about this since Attack of the Clones, the movie itself.
Yeah, they definitely are clearly operating as generals, right? In this, we do get just the other thing, and we'll get into it a little bit more when we see more of the clones. But the other way they identify different clones, not just by their name or their armor, but also, even though they all look the same because they're clones, they don't in certain ways. Like, right, Cody has Rex has a shaved head, right? So he doesn't have hair. Cody has like a facial, like a scar on his face. And then we're going to meet some other clones in a little bit that we'll talk about. And I did my best to write down all their names. But who also kind of had, different haircuts, different, maybe tattoos. But yeah, so I guess I'll throw it back to Tom, because, or was it? Yeah, you were talking about the head ripped off and how that was actually done with a purpose and not just.
Yeah, this wasn't one of those random moments. I think this was one clone trooper decided to take an opportunity to just rip the head off of that tactical droid, not just for a sense of a moral victory, but it's more of, hey, because we know what this type of droid is, it's got some information. So we can use that information, because if we go back right after, when the droids start advancing, and then, like you said, Mike, the droids are already in the elevator. So this plan of defensive strategy for the Republic, it's already failed, because it was the whole separatist plan of counterattack and or just attacking in general was already in motion before they even knew it. So it's now more about, how did they know where we are, what we're doing? How did this all come to about, to be honest?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so after they get extracted, then they're back in the command center, and Obi-Wan and Anakin are talking to Cody and Rex trying to figure it out. And I think also at that point too, they get a little bit of the transmission with the tactical droid saying, "Oh, by the way, the Jedi are on the North and South Tower on the 46th floor." So they went after Obi-Wan's first, and then they're trying to figure out what was going on. It's like, well, how did they know about this? We have, who would be able to get into our intel and figure out what it is that we're planning. So they first have an idea of like thinking it could be someone from the separatists, very cunning to penetrate their defenses, get in, hack in, and figure out what's going on. And then after they go, they're like, well, let's just keep this between us. We're gonna go behind enemy lines and do some recon of our own and see who this potential separatist spy is. And then plot twist, something goes off with the comm link, and they're like, wait a minute, someone's been listening in on our conversation the entire time. So they're like, oh crap. They're trying to figure it out, and they walk outside and they see a clone trooper running away, and they're thinking, okay, well, we got him. So they're going around both sides, and then they meet up, and Rex and Cody first realize like, oh shit, we go into the mess hall and it's full of our brothers, and one of us is a spy. So that's a little bit of a gut punch right there, that you're thinking it's someone outside the separatists, but nope, someone within their ranks is the spy. But the question is who?
A traitor.
Mhm.
Right. We do get R2D2 because they use him to try to isolate where the comm link was connected to, which before they do anything else, they decide they need to warn the Jedi, and we get the news that the Jedi's comm links are cut off or communications being blocked. And of course, we get Obi-Wan and Anakin on speeders with separatist droids watching them, and them realizing that they're being watched, and then realizing that they're going into a trap. And of course, they don't turn around. They decide, well, you know what? Best way to see who set the trap is to spring the trap. So that's what they're going to go
about
ahead
that
and
quote
do.
too. I'll be honest. I was thinking about that quote.
I do want to say too, I noticed I didn't write down if it was Rex or Cody, but one of them during the reading of the droid's head refers to the separatists as the Seppies, which I thought was kind of funny, and a very war trope where you come up with some form of nickname or slang to refer to your enemy. So I kind of thought that was interesting that they throw that in there. But yeah, so with that, do we want to move on to the discussion with Slick, or the introduction of another trooper named Slick?
Yes, I mean, it was interesting that when they're reevaluating the comms, it's just like they noticed, Rex points it out, it's like, well, you see these traces that one wouldn't notice, but it's starting to become like a constant pattern, so they know something was up, and then they were able to isolate the signal, and then they name drop another clone named Slick. And it's like, well, it's coming out of this barracks, so they're like, oh god. So they're ready to go over there, and Slick was unaware that they were coming in, and he's heartbroken that someone within his ranks was selling all this intel off to the Seppies, as we want to call them. And he didn't know that Rex and Cody also called in the troops, because they're like, well, we're going to question everybody and get everyone's alibi and see what's going on here. So there was only one name I picked up on it. Ryan, I think you
want me to run through them real quick? All right, so there's a little interrogation. First we meet Jester is the first person questioned, and he says it couldn't have been him, and then Gus steps in and says, no, it wasn't Jester, he was cleaning his weapon. So they kind of defend each other. Then we get Sketch, who gets questioned next. He says he was in the mess hall the whole time. They don't necessarily believe him or have proof, but then a clone whose name I couldn't get, at one point he's referred to as Kid, but then I realized Slick also calls another clone Kid, so I don't think that was his name. He also says he was in the mess with Sketch. We get another individual who says he was in the infirmary. Again, I didn't get his name, but he was in the infirmary and you could check with the doctor and he was there. Then we get a very interesting clone. And this is the one, kind of another reference I was talking about earlier, where we get some more reference. We get Chopper, which fun name. He claims he says he was also in the mess, but then Sketch and the other clone say, no, you weren't. You came in later, but you weren't there originally. So he starts getting a little defensive, and then we find out that he was hiding because he was putting together his collection, and he reveals that he is collecting severed battle droid fingers and wearing them as making a necklace out of them, which, without getting into details that are kind of dark and disturbing, something that does sometimes happen or has been reported to have happened in actual real wars, where certain people collect things from the enemies as souvenirs, and they don't even say like, oh, like they don't even give them a hard time like, oh, you animal, you're taking these things, like these droids fingers or whatever. Instead, they're just kind of
It's
like,
okay, whatever.
they're like, hey, you're illegally removing things from the battlefield. Like that was like it was more like it was against protocol.
That's your take on it? I'm illegally moving stuff off the battlefield?
Okay. So I think at 1.2, I think we cut off to Obi-Wan and Anakin, so they actually make it to the headquarters.
Yes.
Find out it's unprotected. They walk in and they sense someone coming in from behind who's none other than Asajj Ventress. And
do we get her first name this time? I didn't think we got Asajj in this episode yet.
They always just call her Ventress, but this is where
they address her as Ventress.
This is where I'm going to go off and say, like, for those of you who don't know Asajj Ventress, she was first introduced in the 2002-2003 Clone Wars series that was directed by Gennady Tartakovsky, I believe. And this gives some more context. And when this happened back in 2002, 2003, these were like 2-3 minute segments. But, you know, she was an abandoned Jedi. She had blue and green lightsabers. Clearly, she was skilled in it. And then she became Dooku's apprentice, and originally she was tasked to kill Anakin. So you kind of see like, and obviously, you know, Obi-Wan and Anakin were still a master and Padawan relationship at that point in the Clone Wars. So we don't really, and obviously that's kind of been decanonized at this point, but you kind of get that as a, you know, it's a nice way to watch that series and see like the Clone Wars media before Dave Filoni's series pop up to get some of that context, because you see that relationship where, you know, Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ventress all know each other, and for those of you who haven't seen like the Clone Wars series, like, well, how did these three know each other? You would think that, you know, for someone like Asajj Ventress, they would be like, well, who are you? Like, because no one really knew that Dooku had an apprentice.
Yeah, they show up, and I think Obi-Wan like very quickly. He's like,
I have a quick question though, Mike.
Very familiar with
Obi-Wan's got quite the charm with Ventress.
Yeah.
At that point,
I have a quick question though, Mike. It's pretty much like during the animated Clone Wars back on Cartoon Network. I don't think did she have green and blue lightsabers? Because I think we're gonna get more into her character later down the road. I don't think she was a Jedi at all.
Well, again,
he's talking non-canon.
Non-canon at this point. Okay, why I kind of want to have that series as a reference when you're watching this too, because it does provide some foundation for like the actual Clone Wars series, and now it's been like given it's a different identity. Now it's directed by Dave Filoni. I mean, I kind of use that as a reference at some points. Like, well, it may be decanonized, but there are some events that could tie into it, and like I said, you know, with Asajj having that initial task to kill Anakin, you kind of see that, you know, there have been some run-ins with Anakin, Asajj, and Obi-Wan, and whereas like in this one, they're like, oh, hey, it's you, what's up, my sweet, or whatever Obi-Wan says, tries to charm her.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting too, though.
But yeah,
if you haven't seen obviously the other ones, it's actually pretty good storytelling and writing. where we get a lot of information just in that interaction with having a lot of information left out, right? We immediately know just the way they talk, like, oh, like us as a viewer, because I haven't watched the ones you're referring to, Mike, so I don't have that in the back of my mind. And when I saw this the first time, and then again this time, just the way they interact, I'm like, okay, there's history. Like they have history. You know, they've been fighting these battles. We knew that last episode too, right? With just because we learned that Trench was supposed to be vaporized at another battle, and like, so we realized that this isn't the, you know, day one start of the wars. We understand that there's been stuff happening and battles happening. So it's kind of cool that they choose, like, okay, we're not going to do a full backstory, but we'll maybe learn more of her backstory throughout the series, as Tom kind of alluded to.
I just before we continue, I just want to put out a fun fact.
All right.
Now that we saw Asajj Ventress with her 2 lightsabers, and we previously stated this, Mike, you and I, about the PlayStation 2 game Bounty Hunter. The lightsabers that Asajj Ventress use, and this is probably a fun fact that I learned. Someone can, I might be wrong, but someone can look it up. Was used by Kamari Vosa that Count Dooku gave to Asajj Ventress. Instead of her trying to bleed the crystal, he just gave her 2 red lightsabers right off the bat.
So that's perfect, Tom, because that's exactly where I wanted to go to, is the lightsabers. Besides maybe Anakin at one point during the Dooku battle, is this the first time we've seen someone with dual lightsaber? Oh no, Obi-Wan too, maybe against Darth Maul. Did Obi-Wan use Qui-Gon and his own lightsaber at one? No.
Not at the same time.
So it was just Anakin, right? Anakin used Obi-Wan and his briefly.
Yeah.
But this is our first Jedi that exclusively uses dual wielding lightsabers. So we've had, so far chronologically, we've had single lightsaber duelers, dual blade with Darth Maul, and now we get the style of two separate, dual wielding lightsaber, which really cool. Definitely enjoy that, and it makes it, you know, again, more fun to have her fighting both Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon at the same time. You know, does a good job. She's clearly skilled because she holds them off. You know, they certainly don't defeat her.
And you know, just seeing that fight, history likes to repeat itself, because the minute, you know, we watched Count Dooku versus Obi-Wan and Anakin, who's the first one to charge? Anakin. We see this fight now. Who's the first one to charge? Anakin.
You could tell too. I mean, yeah, she was holding her own, but you know, clearly it was just she was kind of alluding that, oh, my informant told me you were coming, and you know, she's stalling, but you know what's really going on. And as the battle progresses, you see her like fleeing into a library, throwing books at, or you know, force throwing some books at both Obi-Wan and Anakin. Between the two of them, they throw it back at her, and then you know she appears to surrender, but really she has her lightsabers at the ground, and you know breaks the ground. They fall down, and then when they get back up, then they see like the grand plan of like the entire invasion army bearing down on Christophsis. So she's daring them, like, come after me, like here I am with my army. And Anakin's like, well, what's the plan, Master? And yet Obi-Wan's still trying to fraternize with Ventress, and the two eventually, you know, go after her. And I think this is the first time we see an appearance of an octo droid.
Before we go more into that army, because I do want to talk about that, I think we should go back to what's happening.
Yeah, because
it does jump back and forth. Yeah. So after the interview of these clones, and realizing that they all seem to have some form of alibi, they start ganging up a little bit on Chopper, the guy with the finger necklaces, or the finger necklace. But then Slick isn't so slick and lets slip that they should wait till the Jedi get back, therefore giving up that he knew something he wasn't supposed to know, and they now know Slick was in fact the traitor, which he then fights them off and flees, and a chase ensues. And then we find out, of course, what the grand plan is, because he proceeds to destroy the entire, basically, weapons and ammunitions.
And this might come into my hot take right now too. It's a hot take slash what if, and about like being the traitor. And it's more of like, is he a traitor because what we'll discuss later of what he says about how he feels about the war, or is it because of his feelings maybe of he's very I don't know how to say it. He's just very resentful of the Jedi because, for all we know, he could have been the survivor during the Battle of Geonosis. So he's probably seen some things where it'll mentally change your whole perspective. You know, war does crazy things to you. So we don't know what his motives are, but I think there's something towards it. Like maybe he survived the Battle of Geonosis and stuff like that, where he's very resentful of the Republic.
Well, I did write down the quote he says when he which I mean, we can jump ahead to this a little, but it is for my quote, and it's what he says when they do finally catch him. And he states that it's the Jedi who keep my brothers enslaved. Which, interesting enough, he does say too in the presence of Obi-Wan and Anakin. So I thought that was interesting. Anakin, we don't really get a big reaction from him with that, but you would think, somebody that was born into slavery would maybe feel a little bit for that, but he doesn't seem, they didn't have him react to that. But yeah, it just seemed like he didn't want to be doing this, and that's kind of something we talk about, right? I mean, these clones are bred to be an army. It's a clone army. There's no, and they call themselves brothers and stuff, but there's no families back at home. There's no, it's just other clones. They're not, they don't have a say, right? They're just, okay, you've been built to go join an army. You're in an army now. So you can kind of see where he's coming from. And I also think it leads back to the initial quote that, truth enlightens the mind, because now they're all a little more smarter, or a little more enlightened, because they now know who the traitor was, but won't always bring happiness to your heart. But it hurt all the rest of the clones a little bit. It stung right there, because the truth let them know one of their brothers betrayed them, and that it's painful to kind of grasp. And they throw it in his face and they say, you didn't care if any of your brothers got hurt. So
yeah, I mean, I love my brothers, but the way he went about it, yeah, it's just clearly he was more about himself and the money, power, the influence, or freedom that the separatists were offering them. So that, to your point, Tom, war does change one quite a bit. And it's unfortunate that whatever Slick's backstory was, or maybe just whether it's like the battles or Geonosis or something, and now networking with the separatists and undermining his own troops and brothers, unfortunately it did change him.
So we do get, before the Jedi return, we get the face-off kind of with the entire army. And Mike, you brought up the octo droids.
Yeah, like the octo droid that was on the side of the building. Obi-Wan and Anakin are chopping off its legs, and then they realize, well, we need to get out of here. So they jump down to steps, or those vehicles we saw in episode 1, kick off the droids and head back to base. And I mean, Asajj is pretty much getting ready for the next part of her plan, and she just tells them, go attack the Republic now that my traitor has done his work. He destroyed the weapons depot. They're ready to move on the offensive now, so it's going to take them time to regroup and get ready for the siege. So we see another commander on top of a tank, and I believe we'll get his name
They
next
say
episode.
no, they say his name. So he's a general.
Yeah.
She says his name's General Loathsome. I wrote it down.
Hmm.
And it is, I thought it was interesting too, because he's not a droid. So it is and he's a different species, which I believe is Tricodian.
More like General Lonesome.
But yeah, so General Loathsome. And yeah, he's on top of, it's like another spider walker kind of thing, or he's on a tank, but there's other spider walkers we see. Excuse me. So a different alien race that's clearly another Seppi, right? Part of the Separatist army. So that was kind of interesting to see too. I mean, we had Trench last week. But for the most part, it seems like command staff seems to be you call them humanoid species or sentient beings as opposed to droids. So I find that interesting, and we'll see how if that continues to unfold, or if eventually we get maybe a general that's also a droid. I don't know, or part droid.
Well, as they're ready to march, Saj mentions she's ready to execute the next part of her master's plan, and then we see another type of droid which looks like a squid, and who knows what that part of the plan is. So but I guess we'll probably just go back to the face off between Cody, Rex, and Slick, because there were some things that we should probably call out. So like obviously after the depot gets bombed, they get back to the command center, and they're trying to figure, Cody and Rex are talking out, like, think like Slick, what you would do. Because, for Slick, he was definitely someone who was by the book. He had a very good record, very loyal troop up to this point. And they're trying to think, well, what would he do next now that, we've locked down the facilities, bombed the depot, and we're starting to see some hints of like, oh, we have an idea where he is. So I forget which one caught it, but they were able to get the other, either Rex or Cody were able to get the other to play along with it. And it's like, oh yeah, well, let's go to the south exit, knowing that Slick is hiding up above, and Cody is just like, oh yeah, let me just drop my blaster on the table. And then Slick sees that as his opportunity to go in and shoot him, but it's like, oh, hey buddy, I got the clip right here. And then Rex comes in and has him. So
Yep, they pull a fast one on Slick.
Yeah, they were Slick there, so give them that. But and then you see Rex and Cody, acting like a team and taking him down. So so we do get to see a lot of dynamic. Unfortunately, in bad terms with Slick turning on his brothers, but you see dynamic between the clones and working together and turning him in.
I thought Rex got his leg broken during that fight, though.
I thought that
But
too.
then the next scene, he seems to be walking fine. But it's like a full. He grabs his leg and it crunches. He hits it, and you hear the crunches. The subtitles even said crunch, crunch, crunch.
Seems like he didn't bomb the infirmary, so he must have healed really fast.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what happened there. If maybe maybe we'll notice later that Rex has a limp or something.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely fun seeing a little hand-to-hand combat too, right? A little fighting. Slick was pretty good. He seemed to really
held
do
his
a
own.
number on both of them. He was really holding his own, and then they took him. But yeah, with that, I think after the quote I already mentioned in the confrontation, and they say send Slick off to the barracks, not the barracks, the lockup. But then we get the final bit of an army's on the way. What do we got left? And they said all they have were some of their heavy cannons, right?
Mm-hmm.
For defense, and then the war will go on. So I guess we see what happens next episode. Anything else from anyone? Any other deep dives?
I think the only thing I'll say is this episode was just very nice. It was well balanced between Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Cody and Rex and the clones. A nice little split dynamic balance between two different sides of battling the Clone Wars. But other than that, that's just it.
Oh, I'm gonna say something else. I really want to see a live action Ventress, and we're gonna get more Ventress, but I think Ventress is an awesome character. So hopefully, at some point, maybe that happens. Maybe with our Ahsoka series. Of course, we mentioned the Ahsoka series, but nobody knows who Ahsoka is yet if you're watching it chronologically. But we'll with that, I guess Mike, take it away.
Well, I'll just say one thing, since we are watching the Clone Wars chronologically, we have been jumping around a little bit. As Tom mentioned at the beginning, we were at season 2, now we're back to season 1. And with next week, we're going to be watching Clone Wars the movie. So this was the first entry chronologically that Dave Filoni started off with. So it started off with this 2008 Clone Wars movie, and then this entire series, which we're going to do a complete dive on later on. But that's what we have in store next week. So with that, it's a wrap. Thank you everyone for joining Three Simple Men making their way through the galaxy. Hit that like, comment, and subscribe, and come back next week as we dive more into this movie. May the force be with you always.